So I'm trying to explain what's happening here because it comes out of a new book, right? And the book is called, it's a great title actually, Get In, the inside story of Labour under Starmer. And it's written by these two political journalists, Patrick Maguire and Gabriel Pogrund. OK, so they say this woman met Starmer. She's a voice coach called Leonie Mellinger. And they met at Labour's headquarters on Christmas Eve 2020 when we're in the depths of lockdown to help him prepare for a press conference following Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. If you remember, we had some pretty serious restrictions then. So Tier 4, London, this is the area in question, was stay at home, meaning different households couldn't mix indoors. In the book, it's claimed that Leonie qualified as a key worker because she was a voice coach and she wore a face mask. That hasn't stopped claims that Starmer broke the lockdown rules. He's denied it. His official spokesperson has refused to be drawn any further. They do not like this story. This guy, though, is raising it. He's Richard Holden, Shadow Conservative Minister. He's written to Starmer saying, you've got serious questions to answer. And we're just asking you whether you think that's right or whether actually we just say, oh, it's such a long time ago. Carole, it doesn't matter.
You know why this matters? It matters because this is not just because Starmer sets himself up as a titan of morality, not just because he was the one pushing so forcefully for harder and tighter rules, but it matters mainly because millions of people in this country made massive sacrifices to stick to the rules. Fathers didn't get to see babies being born. Children weren't allowed to touch or be close to their dying parents. You know, Christmas 2020 was obliterated for millions of families. This is the time this happened because of those very strict Tier 4 restrictions. And here we have our Prime Minister who brought down the last Prime Minister because he said he lied over COVID and all the rest of it. And here we have him now doing this. He summoned...
Is it wrong, though?
It's totally wrong. He summoned someone who was not a key worker.
Well, she was a key worker.
No, she's not a key worker. You know, let people at home know what key workers were classed as during COVID. This was people who were public service workers mainly. It was doctors, it was nurses, it was people on the front line of social care, of transport. Those were key health workers.
Right.
It was not, no, hang on.
Well,
it was not a voice coach that would give Keir Starmer acting lessons because he's boring.
All right. OK. What do you think about it?
So I have been consulting the leading barrister on this, a chap called Adam Wagner, now KC. He is seen as the absolute authority on lockdown restrictions. And he has said, we were in Tier 4 regulations at the time. The key question and the key thing at the time was something reasonably necessary for work purposes? You could not have any social gathering. So clearly, this was not a social gathering, unlike the parties at Number 10, wine time on a Friday, all of that kind of thing. Was this a work event? Clearly, this was a work event. Adam Wagner's view on this is that if the police were looking at it, they wouldn't be likely to investigate it because of that threshold. Remember, reasonably necessary for work purposes, not a social gathering, not bottles of wine, parties, karaoke machines, all of that kind of thing. It would be unlikely that they would have issued a fixed penalty notice. In terms of being reasonably necessary, this is arguably the second most important politician of the day because he's the leader of the opposition. He has a team of people that work for him. So this was a work thing. The other thing is very important is it is more than 3 years since this happened, so there's a statutory limitation. But I think, so that's the legality. But I think on a political point, Rick Holden is the guy who reported Keir Starmer for the Beergate thing that came to nothing. And I think what the Tories are trying to do here, they're pretty desperate right now because the reform is absolutely tearing into them. Let me just finish, Carole. Then you can you can call me weak in a minute and slag me off, but just
I'm not just slagging you
said
off.
weak. Just let me finish my argument before you could lay into me.
As well.
What the Tories are trying to do is they're trying to do an equivalent with Boris Johnson. They're trying to say he's the same as Boris Johnson. Number 10 under Boris Johnson was the most fined address in the country for COVID breaches. There were broken swings, there were suitcases of booze. This was clearly a work thing. Now, you can laugh about the voice coach. I hear you. I don't think she did a very good job, by the way.
Carole, we need to take a call. I'm sorry.
So I think
this is. I think
this is political desperation.
All right. Okay.
And it was reasonably necessary for work purposes.
I'll come back to you, Carole. Let's just talk. I want to talk to Esther in Cheshire because this is very personal for you, Esther.
Yes, it is. I wonder if Ayesha can say if it is more important that Keir Starmer had a voice coach on that day when I couldn't be with my dad when he passed.
So I would say on that, in the same way that I was categorised as a key worker, we were all categorised as key workers because we're journalists. Personally, I don't think I should have been a key worker, by the way. I don't think my job, no offence to everybody sitting on this panel, I think that, you know, what you went through with your dad is absolutely terrible. But I don't think that is Keir Starmer's doing. I think what was more terrible is the parties that happened at Downing Street.
You think there's a double standard, Esther? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's his fault, but why was that acceptable?
Do you know what, Esther? I think there's a lot of these COVID restrictions that we look back on and there's really legitimate questions.
That's not the point. The point is the law was clear.
Carole.
No, but you can't.
Carole.
I've got to be like, no, stop putting your hand up.
Carole, the law says reasonably necessary.
Can I tell you what the law says? The law said that it was really clear. It says everyone must work from home unless they are unable to do so. Now, don't tell me this woman, Leonie Mellinger, could not have done this chat on Zoom. Of course, she perfectly reasonable.
Not a voice coach. I mean, okay,
yes,
you can argue that he doesn't need a voice coach, or that,
it was to do. It wasn't just about.
But you need to be able to hear.
It wasn't just about voice coach. It was because he was going to do a speech about Boris's Brexit, and he needed to be able to.
But I do think a voice coach probably is an in-person thing.
And the law at the time, according to the most eminent KC,
I don't care what. Listen, the law as written.
This is all about the law.
As written.
The law as written.
We've just done a thing about Lucy Letby where you were very good about how the law really mattered. Now you're saying the law doesn't matter.
I'm reading what the law says, and does that KC happen to work for the Labour Party by any chance?
Reasonably.
Does the KC happen to do work for the Labour Party?
No, he does not.
Right. So the law said at the time, I've just read it out here, everyone must work from home unless they are unable to do so. Residents in tiers 1 to 3 should not enter tier 4 areas. Leonie Mellinger did.
Okay. And let me read you back what the KC says. The only important question is whether the in-person voice coaching visit was reasonably necessary for the purposes of work.
So it would be arguable.
And that the gathering was reasonably necessary
Did you
for
hear
work.
what Esther
a lot of people
Did you hear what
coming
Esther
on.
said?
Yeah.
She said, is it more important that he had a voice coaching lesson than she was allowed to be with her dad?
That is it. That's a
and the
slightly
answer is
different
no.
question.
Okay, Esther, thank you for your call. Let's get another call. Sorry, everybody. Lee in London, hello. You think Carole's right, I gather?
You're telling me. Keir Starmer is a sanctimonious twerp. And everybody should remember that at the time, he was calling for harder and harsher lockdowns, telling us how bad the situation was, telling us how many thousands of people were going to die. And he brought this voice coach from Brighton, which was breaking the lockdown. And the Tier 4 regulations were law. They weren't advisories. Exactly. They were law.
Yeah,
and now he's being undone.
But you could... When it's a key, look, we've gone through it. You say it's law. If it's a key worker, it needs to be reasonably. Yes. But a key worker has to be reasonably necessary for them to meet their client. In this case, she might argue she can't do voice coaching down Zoom because it was always crackling.
And it's on record that she did during lockdown. She did her voice coaching via Zoom.
All right. Well, that's a very good point, Lee. Thank you, Irene in Essex. Hello.
Good morning, panel.
A lot of people calling in, very unsympathetic to Keir Starmer.
Yeah, well, I'm another one, Jeremy.
Right.
It's a shame he didn't have a truth coach.
Yeah.
What do you need? I mean, I can't even look at him when he speaks. But the thing is, no, she should not have been there. And to come up with someone like a truth coach to make an excuse for that.
Well,
never had a problem.
I mean, maybe politicians, I don't know. Listen, I'm defending what may be indefensible. But you know, politicians, I suppose, make laws, but they do see themselves as a class apart because they got to run the country. So he decides, though, that's the rule for everyone else, not for me.
Well, he was a CPS guy, and also he probably spoke really well when he was in the CPS. But no, she shouldn't have been there. Clever one to come up with that she was a voice coach. Was she? I don't know.
Well, I don't think we're doubting that, but
Gosh, wow! I mean, sorry, that's a bit. We're now into what conspiracy. What did you think she was doing then? What you're alleging?
Oh well, I'm not going to go into that, but I don't think she should have been there. Not that
some sort of companionship thing.
That proves that is a bad faith. That's a bad faith. That is. So you've just jumped to the conclusion because you don't like Keir Starmer, which is, as you're right, you've just made a really slanderous leap about something which is completely different. That just shows that as a bad
Well, no, she's just saying maybe
Aisha, I don't know how
let's ask Ayesha this, Carole. We can ask the same question. How has Keir Starmer gone from winning the election by a margin that was unbelievable to being so unpopular?
Okay, that's a serious question to ask, and there's no doubt that things are very, very difficult.
I don't understand
for the Labour Party.
Well, why don't people like him? Because he seems to be like a really inoffensive. I mean, I personally think, one-to-one, he's one of the nicest political leaders we've had in my lifetime, and that's nothing to do with his politics. I'm just saying that from my. Well, that may be it, or it may be people. So, but I put that aside from. But for some reason, people loathe him.
Well, that's also because, you know, this country's in a really, really difficult situation. And understandably, people want to change. But in 6 months, you can't just wave a magic wand and undo 14 years. Carole, I'm not denying that the mistakes have been made. But the idea that you can just magic away more than 14 years of a very failed state in 6 months is just unrealistic.
Tell me something. Can I just say, explain Downing Street's response when they were first told about this. Their first reaction was they wouldn't engage in a conversation about it because it happened when he was in opposition. So what were they actually saying? That because Keir Starmer was in opposition, he could break the rules? Because that's what it sounded like to the people of this country.
Well, I don't work at Number 10, Carole. I am not.
But you know the Labour Party.
Well, I do know the Labour Party.
Stupid like
I go back to the central point of this. This is about politics. Rick Holden tried to get them. He tried to get the Durham police to arrest him, and that did not work. So he's come back for a second bite of the cherry.
You could say that.
Hang on, Carole. It doesn't work. It doesn't work if you just yell at me.
This goes to the heart of Labour and its rank.
I mean, you've also said that as well.
You have.
But it goes
Carole, you've said what you both said.
Necessary.
You definitely said that already. Okay, every single call was one way here. They were all backing Carole on it, and they were all saying Starmer is out of line.
And the thing is,
Jeremy, they don't like Jeremy. I get that.
They're not backing me. They're actually because they stuck to the rules, these people, and they stuck to them religiously at great personal cost to themselves. And they say this hypocrite breaking them.
Okay, look, you've always got to have the last word.
That is not true. He's not broken the rules.
Who wants to have the last word? Let's decide. So you had it, then I'm going to have the last word.
You have the last word.
It's me. Later, it's the papers and everything else. Find out.